It's a case that's drawing international attention to Russia, the trial of 3 members of a punk band called Pussy Riot. They were charged after staging an anti-Kremlin protest inside a Moscow church. Earlier today, a court handed down its verdict. All 3 women were found guilty of hooliganism. Masha Gessen is a supporter of the band and the author of The Man Without a Face, The Rise and Rule of Vladimir Putin, and she joins us now from New York. So, Masha, what do you make of today's sentence?
Well, we actually don't have the sentence yet. We have the guilty verdict, but the judge has been reading the sentence now for almost 2 hours. We're still waiting for her to get to the punishment part. What I would expect is that they're going to get real jail time, probably about 3 years each in a penal colony, for a 40-second peaceful protest inside a church.
And what do you think of that?
I think it's excessive. I think it's a case that's polarized Russia to an extent that we haven't seen before. I think it also makes a lot of sense that it's drawn so much international attention, because Russia has really shown the true colors of the current regime in a way it hasn't before. And what we've seen is a witch trial. These women are essentially tried for blasphemy, and they're going to go to jail for it.
And how ironic do you find that, given that actually, Russia not that long ago was officially, when it was a communist country, was an atheist country? How far has that country gone in terms of putting people away for religion, for, as you say, for blasphemy?
Things easily turn into their opposite. 30 years ago, people used to go to jail for practicing their religion. Now they go to jail for not practicing their religion, or practicing it in a way that the government doesn't find appropriate. The point is, people keep going to jail in Russia for being different and for sticking their neck out.
Vladimir Putin had come out and said, look, we don't want this sentence to be too harsh on these women. But do you think that was just posturing? Do you think that he actually is part of the reason behind all of this in the first place?
He's the reason. He is not part of the reason. He's it. The words of the so-called punk prayer that they sang are actually, "Mother of God, get rid of Putin." And I am sure that if they had sung, "Mother of God, please keep Putin," they would not be going to jail now, or they would not be in any way penalized for protesting inside a church. They're being punished for the anti-Putin protest, but the form that it's taking is this form of blasphemy. His own statement on this was illogical. It was sort of a two-part message. Part of what he was saying was that the court had to make its own decision. He bore no responsibility for it. And the other part he was saying was that, well, don't give them 7 years, which is the maximum penalty that's possible under felony hooliganism. Give them just 3 years.
So, and by the way, we just want to let our viewers know that the judge has been reading the sentence for about an hour and a half now, but as you say, there's no specific period of time in which jail time, as is expected, has been announced. But I want to ask you, just in terms of, there obviously is some visceral hatred of Vladimir Putin that come from these 3 women that also must be emblematic of a wider feeling amongst a certain group of people in Russia. Where does that come from?
I think it comes from the experience of living in Russia, and these women have actually been incredibly articulate on this subject. One of their more memorable quotes comes from one of their closing statements, which is that the air in Russia is so thick with lies, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, that breathing the air makes them sick. And I think that's a feeling that's common to an increasing number of people. Those are the people who've been coming out into the streets in Moscow and in other cities to protest Putin's rule. It's humiliating to live in Russia. It is humiliating to interact with the state in any way. And this trial has also been incredibly humiliating, not just to the 3 women, but to anyone who's been watching, with the judge saying things like, indicating that being possessed by the devil is a medical diagnosis, and one has to have a medical degree to render an opinion on it. The judge blatantly violating procedure, disallowing most witnesses for the defense because they weren't in the court building, but they actually weren't allowed into the court building on the judge's orders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you think that Vladimir Putin, do you think that the Russian elite, the Russian establishment, is watching people in the rest of the world looking at this case, and many people saying this is crazy. Are they sensitive to that, or do they just not care, or what could be part of the thinking?
You know, it reminds me of what happened with Soviet Jewry in the 70s and 80s. There was a period of time when any negotiation with an important American official began and ended with the fate of Soviet Jewry, which wasn't allowed to emigrate. And the Soviet leadership could not figure out why they cared, right? Why could they possibly care about 2 million Jews who were living in Russia? It's a similar situation now. They really can't figure out why it's caused such resonance in the West, and why Western pop stars and Western leaders, including David Cameron, who began his conversation with Putin not with the Olympics, but with the fate of Pussy Riot, why do they care? To the second part of your question, it's extremely important that people care in the West, not just because of the moral support that the women are getting, that they need very much, but also because that will improve their conditions. It will not change their sentence, but it will improve the conditions in which they're kept. After the world learned that they weren't allowed to sleep or eat, which is standard procedure for anybody who's going through a trial in Russia, but after the world learned of this, their conditions were actually improved. And I think that we can have every hope that as long as the eyes of the world are trained on these women, they will at least not be tortured.
A final quick question for you. You've written that this case may actually determine Russia's future. What do you mean by this?
It's really divided society, and I think that part of the reason that it's caused such resonance in the West is that the West can really see that these women speak the political language of the contemporary world, and what they're up against is a 16th century court. We've never seen it quite so clearly, quite so starkly. And I think people in Russia are choosing sides right now. Do they want to live in a 16th century society, or do they want to live in the contemporary Western world? I'm afraid that the people who can make the conscious decision to live in a modern world are a minority, but they're a vocal minority and they're a powerful minority.